The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Atlas Chiropractic Center of Escanaba, Michigan, Largent Media, or any of their affiliates or subsidiaries. The material and information presented in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Should you need medical attention or advice, seek out a licensed medical professional or facility in your area. The Tapping Into Uncomfortable with Reade Hubert DC name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.
Welcome to Tapping Into Uncomfortable, where we do it different, way different. This podcast could be dangerous to your dendrites. So what I need you to do is to place a thick piece of barbecue foil on your head or a half a teaspoon of the Riff. Added to a cup of water can help. Happy day. By the way, folks, one of the most amazing, fantastic, and coolest thing has happened, that life expectancy in the United States is almost at pre-pandemic levels, which is really super cool. And there's one really amazing statistic. The reason why our life expectancy is going back up is because COVID deaths are down. So that's super cool. But check this out, that the next generation of Americans, the younger folks, are not abusing opioids. They're starting to turn their back on them, so they're not getting heavily addicted to them. Yay! But it brought up this really big question. Did we rearrange our vices? Did THC replace opioids? Or question number 2, did THC just become virtuous? You know, that is way too serious for starting out the program. What are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk about red dye. We're just going to answer the question and answer from the last time, which is your reality plastic? Can you change it? Then we're going to challenge you with another question. So let's get moving. Well, very interesting something has happened. Grandpappy always said, even the sun shines on a dog's butt some days. I have an unexpected podcast that just came into my life that takes the 14 content podcasts that I have been talking about, little tiny things, and all the crazy stuff I've been talking about kind of ties into this thing called red dye and what just happened to it. So your brain, I always tease you about putting tinfoil on. It may overheat today because we're actually going to show you some stuff, why it happened, when it happened, what's potentially coming, and we'll see what happens. The feds finally banned red dye number 3. Now, I'm going to be bringing up a whole bunch of different numbers, different dates, different times, so you're going to have to pay attention. I apologize. I'm glad I had my tinfoil on when I'm doing this. Now, red dye number 3 is petroleum-based. It's been with us since 1907. We have 117 years to this before it was banned. Now what happens is when the ban comes in, they actually have 2 years to change the recipe. So will they grab another dye or will they not dye the food that this is put in? These synthetic dyes, not necessarily for food, but the first synthetic dye goes all the way back to 1856. Pre-Civil War was the first dye. From that first dye, that's when they started dyeing clothes, doing all this stuff. That's when dye started to get into foods into the late 1800s. Red dye number 3 has been banned federally, but California took out number 40 last year. Anybody who wants to do business in California has to take out number 40. Now they're going to take out number 3 across the country. They have a couple years to do that, to remove their stock, come up with a different idea. Now, watch this. You look at all these different numbers. So when you have red dye number 3, there's usually red dye something else, red dye number 40. So red dye number 2 was amazing that in 1976, it was finally banned in the United States. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union came out and says red dye number 2 is showing cancer effects in intestinal tumors in female rats at high doses. Now remember that. Female rats at high doses. And that's absolutely fascinating because 5 years later, once the Soviet Union came out and said that, the American public started screaming, crying, getting some hysteria so bad that they banned red dye number 2 in 1976, even though it wasn't our data, came from the Soviet Union. We have a red scare within the red scare. So in 1976, when they banned red dye number 2, Mars Corporation, which makes M&Ms, by the way, introduced orange M&Ms while getting rid of red M&Ms, even though the red M&Ms never had that dye in it. That's how bad this red scare was. And then what ended up happening is in the late 80s, they reintroduced red M&Ms back in. That's how bad the red scare got. But what happened after 1976, when number 2 was banned, they replaced number 2 and the successor was red dye number 40. See where I'm going with this? Now watch how crazy all this is. When we are adding just color to our food, watch what happens. Red dye number 2 is not legal in the US, but it is legal in the European Union, except for the United Kingdom and Switzerland. Number 40 in the European Union has to have a warning that it causes attention deficits or issues and activity in kids. It has to have a warning when it's in that food. The US, number 2 is banned. Number 40 is fine, except if you're in California. And California has also banned other types of dyes too. Do you see where I'm going with this? You know what? This is so crazy. I am dying for a break. The following is a PSA. That's public service announcement, not prostate-specific antigen test. Brought to you by Tapping Into Uncomfortable University. Hi, I'm Reade Hubert, president of Tapping Into Uncomfortable University, also known by TIW by our alumni throughout the world. Because we're community-based, we have programs and degrees for everyone, for the traditional students down to the non-traditional students. For the traditional students, we have cursive writing and comprehension degree. Another degree is telling time from a clock and rotary phone repair. For our non-traditional students, we have a lecture series in 2025. And the topics range from, yes, they think you look and smell funny, to ordering online and delivery. And last but not least, I know there's no wires, the mystery of Bluetooth. We will end this PSA with our university slogan. Remember, thoughts, toxins, trauma, and traits, we're all connected. Isn't that great? Welcome back at Tapping Into Uncomfortable. We believe in full disclosure. The president of Tapping Into Uncomfortable University is not related or affiliated with us. Why is all this getting done? Why bother with red dye now? It's been 1907, 117 years of data. Because here's what happened. Congressman Delaney out of New York helped create a bill in 1958. It's called the Delaney Clause. Now, the Delaney Clause says that if these products, dyes, other additives, are found to cause cancer in animals, you can't be putting it in human food. Since the 1980s, we've known that red dye number 3 has caused cancer in very high amounts in male rats. Now, remember, we just went through with number 2 from the Soviet Union. Number 3, high massive amounts were given to rats that caused cancer, screwed them up hormonally, and it showed cancer in male rats. Well, if it showed cancer in the 80s in our good science, why was it banned in 2024? Why wasn't it banned sooner? So in 1990, you had to ban red dye number 3 from cosmetics in America. Okay. So now 34 years later, we're now banning it. Why are we banning it now? I am a firm believer that red dye number 3 does not cause cancer in humans. Here's the reason why. We've had 117 years of data. We've had 117 years of statistics. The only way that you can really find cancer, we can't go and do studies on people. What we can see is there something going on with a certain amount of people in a certain age group or in a certain town, or is there something going on? And then we go, there's something that's not right statistically. Then we investigate it and go backwards. A great example of a statistical anomaly in cancer, which is getting worse and much larger, is in colorectal cancer in 20 and 30 years old. The search is on, and maybe that will spur change when a definitive answer is found in the years ahead. We've never had a huge cancer outbreak in children who this mainly is, or anybody that continues to eat red dye. But the law says you have to ban it. But it didn't say when it had to ban it. Here's what's amazing about this. We have a smart people versus a smart people. So what ended up happening is a petition that was done in 2022 between consumer group and scientists signed this petition, gave it over to the government entity and said, hey, look, you banned this in 1990, the Delaney cause in 58. We know it caused cancer in high amounts in male rats. Why don't you just take this out? And the feds finally said, fine, we'll do it. But we don't think it causes cancer, and I don't think we should even be doing this. They have 2 years, once again, to change the recipe. Are we now going to go back to a different type of dye? Because here's what's happening. Because we're so smart, we don't think the Delaney clause should actually be allowed anymore. We should either get rid of it or we should modify it because we really don't know what we were talking about in 1958. It's amazing, isn't it? So here's what we do know also, that these dyes are removed through rectosigmoid contents. You are not to have red dye or any darker dyes before you have a colonoscopy, because in the alimentary canal, it could look like blood. It could throw off your tests. What I said in the last podcast is, I think it's causing some health problems. What I did is I took opinion of mothers over evidence. If you look at some of the studies on red dye number 3, it's showing that there could be hyperactivity in children. And so what I did is I hear it time and time again in my office, and I agree it's causing problems. Why should we have it in there? The big question is, folks, why do we have something that all it's pretty much good for is changing the color? It's minimal calories. It doesn't have a taste. It's not toxic unless you get in a high level, supposedly, correct? Why is this in our food? Think about it. I'm going to give you a second. Oh, going back to what we've been talking about for numerous podcasts. Folks, this is all about marketing. If you can take a synthetic cherry flavor and you can match your eyes, the emotion of food, and make it bright red, put that in your mouth, and you get that cherry feeling hit your tongue. Do you see what we're doing? That's the only purpose that it serves. It might have a little bit of preservative value for putting it on the shelf, but other than that, the dyes, that's all they do is give it color. Some of you will remember the red dye powder on pistachios. It is a great example of marketing. They ended it in the 1980s, but the red powder was used so that they would stand out, but also cover up imperfections of the shell that could impact sales. You could always tell when somebody got into the pistachios because of the ruby red lips. Here's my answer to this whole thing, even though I never asked you the question. Who cares if it's banned or not? I do not care if red dye is banned at all. I don't care if dyes are banned at all. I don't care if they're there. Do I think they should be there? No. But watch this. Who is responsible for getting red dye into your body, let alone red dye into your children's body? I'll give you a second here to figure that one out. Oh, it's you. Interesting, hey? The lateral pterygoid comes back to get you. So the lateral pterygoid, remember what we said is the muscles on the side of the jaw that open your mouth, and cranial nerve number 5 goes to it, and you voluntarily open your mouth. If you look at what this dyes and all these colorings and what type of food that they're in, do you really think that by banning these dyes that it's going to help with diabetes type 2, links to other problems? Do you really think that? So what ultimately is the problem? Us. We are the problem. Red dye should never affect your diet, correct? Because you can live without it. You can live an amazing, fantastic, wonderful, healthy diet without even taking in any of this, except in medications. And here's a very fascinating side note. Some of the ADHD meds, one of them in particular has red dye in it. But here's the kick in the butt. It is not red dye number 3. And we don't know if it causes hyperactivity, at least that number. So there we are, folks, going right back into it. I really don't care if this is in our food because you never have to put it into your body. So the favorite part of the program is answering the question and answer from the last time. Is your reality plastic? Can you change it? We are absolutely, positively designed to change. Your brain is plastic. You can start adding, deleting, changing your life, making decisions. But here's the really super duper cool thing is how you change your life is by making a decision. We are here because of the decisions we made or the decisions that were made for us. So realize that the decisions, desire, and discipline from the last podcast has a lot to do with changing your future. The last question before we melt your brain, if you didn't put the tinfoil on, is can you get the flu from the flu shot? That's right. It's a deep question. Can you get the flu, influenza, from the flu shot? So as always, I want you to be happy. I want you to be healthy. And I want you to just be. This whole podcast is based on a book. Be on the lookout for 4 T's to a Better You, a blueprint for identifying and addressing the 4 causes of sickness. You'll be able to buy it just about everywhere.